People who tried beer for the first time probably were astounded by the mystical qualities. They were mind-altering qualities. Nothing like this has ever happened before, but something came from this liquid. Who delivered this to us? Only the gods could have. The idea that beer was a gift from above actually resonated throughout history. This liquid had to have been delivered by a deity, and in the case of the Sumerians, that deity was named Ninkasi, the goddess of brewing. She delivered beer to their culture. They prayed to her for a good crop, for a good harvest, and consequently for good beer. And actually what the Sumerians did was to write a recipe for the first beer, and this was called the Hymn to Ninkasi, going back to 4000 BC. This was done in cuneiform tablets, which basically still exist. People are able to decipher them and recreate that beer.
So it is in beer that we've entrusted some of the most important moments in American history. Over beers, the Founding Fathers came up with much of the Constitution in 1787, including Congress's two-house structure, which stands today. Joe's ambitions for his night of drinking are not so bold as the Founding Fathers. He would simply like to talk to the bar's newest patrons. But he must act fast, because before the night is over, he will meet his end. Coming up, what the first alarm clock looked like, and why some very bad children love moonless nights. Throughout history, men have gone to extraordinary lengths to bring us what are now the most ordinary things. Some have profited, others have suffered and died horrible deaths to bring you the elements of your Saturday night out, like beer, billiards, even dancing, and courtship. Tonight, Joe will get a little romantic assistance from a celebration familiar to all of us. This celebration would not be complete without one object that is not taken very seriously today, but was once revolutionary to people's lives: the candle. One of the most important steps in our battle against darkness.
Thousands of years ago, the only way you had light at night after the sun went down was sitting around a communal fire. Candles allowed you to go off on your own. It allowed you to harness light around a small object and leave the group and go have light in your private space. If you wanted light to read or whittle wood, you could do that on your own because you had a light source right next to you. So it gave people independence at night. It created new circles of civilization. I mean, you could go off with a group of people or by yourself because you had individual light. You no longer had to gather around the big fire.
Man soon found other functions for this new technology, besides just using it as a light source. In some cultures, especially China and Arabia in the 10th to 13th centuries, candles were used to tell time. The most famous candle clocks were invented in Mesopotamia by Al-Jazari, who in 1206 marked a candle with intervals to serve as a clock. Each interval was equal to an hour. As the candle burned to a mark, a screw fell out, which would strike the metal dish below, audibly telling you what time it was. As candles developed as a technology, they not only expanded their range of uses, but also their social significance.
Well, there was a point in history where candles became a status symbol. In the 13th century, a candle guild was formed in Europe. Chandlers, as they were called, professional candle makers, that's what a chandler is, in England would go door to door collecting kitchen fat, and they would make candles. They opened up candle shops around England. Well, in 1709, they were very successful at persuading Parliament to ban at-home candle making. So they had a monopoly on candle making, which of course drove up the price. Candles were a status symbol because they were considered something that not the average person could necessarily afford. If you could burn more than one candle in your home at a time, that was considered a pretty big deal.
The story of Miss Jenkins, a fictional character from the time, provides a vivid illustration of the candle as a status symbol. Miss Jenkins was very concerned about appearances. She always kept 2 candles out in her sitting room because that showed she could afford to. But being frugal, she only burned one at a time. She didn't want people to know that, however, so she would alternate between the two, so that both would be of equal length in case company dropped by. And thus it would look as if she had been burning both at the same time. The candle as a primary light source would soon be replaced by newer technologies. But it would not be phased out entirely.
You would think when they invented the light bulb in 1879 that would have been the end of candles. Not so. They continued on and they became more of a decorative piece in people's homes. They weren't necessary, but we still wanted them as part of our lives. Isn't it amazing? Candles are a $2+ billion a year industry, yet we don't really even need them in our lives. There's no practical reason, we just want them. We don't need them, we want them.
Today, candles serve as little more than mood lighting or in ceremonies. But these ceremonies are important as they have the ability to bring people together. As we emerge from the bar into the well-lit street, it's hard to imagine how different this experience would have been for most people throughout history, for whom there was nothing more dark and dangerous than the night. A nighttime stroll is a very recent addition to man's romantic repertoire. Before there was street lighting, the night was pitch dark, and the fear that this inspired is as old as humanity itself.
In ancient times, most people viewed night with great foreboding. The night sky was thought to teem with satanic demons of one sort or another. Despite the different responses that cultures historically have had to darkness, the fact remains that there has always been an instinctive fear of the dark.
Some would even capitalize on the fear of the night to earn their living. In 18th century London, the job of link boy was born. The name link boy derives from the word link, a term for the cotton fiber in a candle's wick. Link boys were usually young orphans or from poor families. In England, they were called moon cursers because moonlit nights hurt their business. Their job was very simple. A pedestrian would come along, and they would offer to light his way home with a torch, a valuable yet straightforward service. Many link boys were honest young men seeking to scratch out a living. But not all. Some link boys found it more profitable to guide their customers into a dark alley, where a Confederate would be waiting to rob them. The profession of link boy was not destined to survive the 19th century. With the invention of the electric streetlight in 1875, man had finally conquered the night.
Beginning in the nascent stages of the Industrial Revolution, there is a sustained assault on nighttime in major urban areas and large towns. A Parisian declares in the mid-1700s, finally, the reign of night will be over.
Coming up, how mankind's quest to unlock one of the greatest mysteries of the universe led to a truly shocking discovery. Most of us spend our lives blind to the epic events that lie just behind everything around us. We often have trouble seeing things for what they really are. If Joe had paid more attention to how our world got to be how it is, he might be able to avoid his fast approaching death. He might also know to regard with appropriate awe and caution one of man's most marvelous discoveries: electricity. It has brought the night to life and banished darkness permanently.
Throughout human history, there's been a huge sense of mystery and magic about this incredibly powerful force. So over 1,000 years ago, Arab traders would perform a magic trick, maybe to bring customers to them or to enchant their children. They would rub a piece of amber with a piece of fur. The amber would charge up with electrostatic electricity, and then you could use it to attract little objects like feathers or pieces of lint or so on. And so magically you'd see these things move through the air to attach themselves to the amber. So you had this beautiful spectacle, maybe by the fireside in the desert, where the amber would be charged up and people would watch as these objects mysteriously became attracted to it.
Man has been aware of this static electricity for many millennia, but he'd never known what it was or how to store it for later use until the mid-18th century. In 1745, a German physicist and Lutheran cleric named Ewald Georg von Kleist set out to better understand this mysterious force. He wished to create a device that could store and release an electrical charge. He began by lining a glass jar with silver foil and filling it halfway with water. He then took a cork with a wire running through it and corked the bottle so that the wire was touching the water. The wire and water connected to the inner foil, which he then linked to a crude friction machine. It was his theory that the electricity produced by the friction generator would be transferred into the jar. But if it stored too little, it would be useless, and too much could be deadly. His device worked. Man had controlled electricity. The question now was how to distribute it. In the late 1880s, this issue was at the root of one of the most notorious debates in the history of science. There were two possible methods of distribution. One was direct current, or DC, which means the electrons only move in one direction from the source of power to their destination. The second was alternating current, or AC, in which the power moves backward and forward, sometimes using a revolving magnet. The defenders of the competing methods were two former colleagues, Thomas Edison for DC and Nikola Tesla for AC.
Edison engaged in something that we now call the current wars, this great battle between AC from Tesla and DC from Edison. DC is actually fairly dangerous. One of the greatest storms in American history happened in 1888, which really shut down the eastern seaboard for over a week. And many people were killed because Edison's early DC power lines were falling on them as a result of the snowstorm. And yet Edison waged a campaign to convince everybody that AC, not DC, was dangerous. And the way he did this was by electrocuting animals in public. He started with stray cats and dogs, moved on to horses and cattle, and ended up in 1903 executing an elephant called Topsy from Coney Island in front of 1,500 people using AC. He also took a movie of it, which he shared around America. The elephant is standing there, obviously with no idea what's about to happen to it. Clouds billow up around its feet, and it drops down dead. Electricity kills you in a couple of ways, probably at the same time, but you have a high voltage current pass through your body. It will stop your heart, it will interfere with your brain function, it will arrest your breathing, it will cause you tremendous pain, put you into shock. Not a pleasant way to die. You can't see it, you can't smell it, you can't touch it, but it's part of the very fabric of the universe, and if you get on the wrong side of it, it will kill you.